So I'll talk a little bit how I became a writer, because it's, yeah, I know. So in 2000, are there any writers in the house? I just imagine there must be. Yes, there's one here. Yes, yes, gotcha. I probably became a writer the same way you guys did, and that is catastrophe. In 2008, I went horseback riding in Iceland, and I broke my neck in 5 places riding on the edge of an active volcano. C2 through C5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, C2 through C6, multiple breaks, and C4, as the pros call it, the one in the middle, was crushed. They get me to the doctor in Iceland. I was going in and out of consciousness, so nobody knew how bad off I was. They put me in a truck, drove me a few hours down the mountain to a little local doctor in Iceland. She puts me in a neck brace. They drive me to Reykjavik. They do a DVD of a CAT scan of my neck, which I called Stephen Tobolowsky's greatest hit. I come back to America and go to my doctor and give him Stephen Tobolowsky's greatest hit. He re-x-rays me, checks my neck, and he's ashen. And he tells me the extent of my injury and said I had a fatal injury, which obviously I did not. It was a terrible misuse of the word fatal. So I'm in a neck brace now, and it's going to take like 3.5 months to heal. And at first I thought the pronouncement that I was a dead man walking was kind of terrifying. And then I thought it was kind of funny. And then I found it strangely inspirational. And I was thinking, what if what that doctor said was true? And what if I really died on that mountain in Iceland? What are the stories I didn't tell my 2 boys about their dad? Growing up, the stories, I never got a chance to tell them. So I'm in this neck brace, and I start writing true stories from my life about the girl I fell in love with when I was 8 years old, when she was playing the piano in her bluebird outfit with her ponytail flying. Yeah, it was so good. About my first adversaries I had, and first jobs, and not necessarily the day my mother died. All sorts of stories. And I wrote them for my boys to read. And when I did that, a student from Harvard, David Chin, asked if I wanted to record any stories because he knew I was a storyteller. So I said, sure. So we recorded these stories. He put them on the internet. And one of the heads of an NPR station, program director, heard them on the internet and wrote me on my email at home and said, can we put your stories on the radio? I said, sure. No money involved, just, yeah, sure. So then these stories end up on about 12 different NPR stations, and then they start going around the world. And then Simon & Schuster said, can we do a book of your stories? So that's how you get a book published. Don't die on the mountain. That's the key to it. So I wrote, my first book was The Dangerous Animals Club, which is basically stories of the club I had when I was a kid, catching poisonous snakes in the river in Texas where I grew up, and my mother never knew about it, and falling in love with my girlfriend in college, Beth, who turned out to be Beth Henley, who won the Pulitzer Prize, which was very unusual. And then Simon & Schuster said, well, we enjoy the humor of your stories, but also your stories seem to have a spiritual bent. Is it possible you could write another book of true stories and have it tied together with a spiritual through line? And I said, sure, no problem. I had no idea what I was going to write, but if Simon & Schuster says, can you write a book? And you go, oh, yeah, easy. I got that one right here. So my editor came out when I was shooting Californication. We were going to shoot some naked scenes that night at a swimming pool. Oh, yeah. The girl, they got a body double for Pam Adlon, who played Marcy. And this girl was very nervous because she had never done a naughty scene before. And I had done plenty of them on Californication. And she said, I just have never done a scene with such intimacy. And I said, there's going to be nothing intimate happening here. You're not even going to know we're in the same swimming pool. Don't even worry about it. So anyway, I see my editor for dinner, and before I go shoot this scene all night, he goes, so how's the spiritual book coming? And I hadn't thought about it at all. And then what came out of my mouth was one of the most fortuitous things I ever said. I said, well, Ben, this is the way I look at it. I think my life and every person's life I've known follows the template of the Old Testament. We all have a Genesis. These are the first stories we tell on a first date with the first glass of Chardonnay. About who we are, where we came from, our family, our aspirations, our terrors. Then we all go into slavery. We don't build pyramids anymore, but we lose ourselves to first loves, terrible first employments. Some people stay in graduate school for years. But then we escape, and in the middle of our lives, we have this Leviticus moment where we say, stop to the universe, this is what I am, and we redefine ourselves. And it was at this point in my life that I got married to Ann, and I had kids. And I came back to Judaism in like a big-time way. I began to understand that I never really appreciated what all those Bible stories meant when I was a child, and it was just beautiful. And then we're all reshaped by mortality, like in the book of Numbers. We lose family and friends, the irreplaceable, and we are reshaped by grief. And then finally, if we're lucky, we get to Deuteronomy where we tell our stories to our children. And Ben said, that's great. Great idea for a book. Write that book. So this is this book. Again, true stories that I wrote for my boys so they would know more about their father. And curiously, they have not looked at these books at all. Not listened to the podcast at all. But I would like to do a short bit of a story for you tonight from the Deuteronomy section of the book. I call this story The Spider and the Telescope. Confusion is exciting when you're young. It represents the mysteries to be solved. In elementary school, I felt destined to be a scientist. You know, my rabbi always said, when the baby is crying, the baby is really talking to God. Oh, and now he's going to see God. Okay. When I was 6, my brother and I branched out into the grandest science of them all, astronomy. Studying the heavens was inspiring. It was the only thing we knew that was eternal. My brother had a book on the stars, but the real study of space came courtesy of our Aunt Helen. She sent us the greatest treasure we had as children, a telescope, a little telescope. It was black and brass and slid out into 3 sections, each one with increasing magnification. I took it out one night. I stood on our driveway to look at the sky. I picked out a star. I decided I would try the 3 sections individually to test their respective powers. I never got past the first section. I was in awe. I was transported. I saw the star through my eyepiece. It was gigantic. It was round and not 5-pointed like the gold stars we got at school. The surface of the star was a blur of blue gas, and it looked like it had vast craters of fire. I ran inside to my bedroom. I turned off the light, jumped into my bed, and pulled out my little notebook my father gave me to draw pictures in, and I began taking notes on my star in the dark using a flashlight. We always have more faith in things we discover in the dark. It was in the dark I first held Beth's hand in college. It was in the dark that I heard Van Cliburn play the piano and felt connected to some universal truth through the beauty he created. It was in the dark I saw Anne's face in the tomato garden. And it was in the dark, by the light of my small flashlight, I drew a picture of my star. I noted its color and the location of its craters. I speculated they were caused by collisions with meteors and other planets. Using my brother's book, I looked up the color blue, and I saw that it meant it was a hot, young star. I guessed at the star's temperature. I wrote a 1 with lots of zeros. I estimated the star's age by writing a 1 with even more zeros. Looking back, writing zeros was always more fun than writing exponents. I decided I would dedicate the next several nights to making more findings with the telescope. And I ran into my first problem. In studying the night sky, there were a lot of stars up there. I had no way of knowing which star was my star. I stood in the driveway in despair. I had let myself down. I had let down the science of astronomy, but most importantly, I had let down my star. What importance did my little star have except in being observed by me? Now, I couldn't find it. I couldn't give up on it. I put my star on the first level of magnification. I looked in the general vicinity of the sky where I thought it was, and amazingly, there it was. The same blue star with the craters of fire. It was fate. In finding my star, I found my future. I was born to science. Not only did I have the desire and the work ethic, I also had luck on my side. I felt like I was master of the universe. I decided to branch out and explore more stars. I moved my gaze to the right and landed on another sphere. That was odd. It looked exactly the same as my star. It was blue, fiery, had the craters. I moved my gaze to another star. It was the same too. Oh dear, something was wrong. In my brief experience with the world, I knew sameness was a condition created by mankind. It was a row of windows on a skyscraper. It was teachers having pencils honed to the same degree of sharpness. It was students arranged in lines according to their heights and seated in identical desks. Sameness is not a trait of the natural world. Frogs, snakes, dogs, cats are all completely different. Trees and flowers are organized by their variation and not prized for their sameness. Stars belong to the natural world. I needed consultation with someone wiser. I went to my brother Paul. Paul left his homework and came outside, took the telescope, looked at the stars with the first degree of magnification, then looked at some other stars. He adjusted the scope to the second and then the third levels of magnification. He stopped. He closed the telescope and handed it back to me. He thought carefully and said, "Stevie, you weren't looking at a star at all. The telescope was just out of focus." What do you mean?" I asked. "You were looking at a blur. You can't see the stars even close up with the magnification of this telescope. They're too far away. You could barely see stars with the 200-inch scope at Palomar." "So the craters of fire and the color," I said. My brother pondered my problem respectfully. Even at the age of 9, he would never think of kicking anyone in their dream. "The findings are inconclusive," he said. That's what astronomers would say. They would say, "Findings inconclusive," and start all over again. He handed me back the telescope. I walked down the hallway to my bedroom, turned on the light, sat on the edge of my bed, took out my star notebook, and wrote in big letters, "Findings inconclusive." I have since learned about the power of discovery. It can extend across decades. Take my star notebook. Even though my findings were based on an out-of-focus blur, several of my conclusions were correct. I deduced that stars were spherical, that they were made of fire. That was right. If I knew how to chart the sky, their location would be correct. As to the color and the craters and the age and the temperature and all of the zeros, I'm afraid that will have to remain in the vast limbo of findings inconclusive. How important is it to be right? Or even more troubling, is it possible to be right at all? How many of the facts in our life do we assume we know with certainty? But if we had a different perspective, we would see we based our beliefs on a blur, on a smear of light we call a star. Perhaps science is not truth at all, but is just an alternate point of view, something in base 10, using models to comfort us with the familiar. For example, for years we were taught that a spider spins a new web every day, and that certain threads are covered with a sticky substance so she could catch her lunch. The spider only puts the substance on certain strands so she can move more easily and quickly across the web and not get stuck. That was our vision of the spider web until a few years ago. Catherine Craig, an evolutionary ecologist at Yale, wondered if we had been operating under the wrong point of view. We always look at the web as people, but we never looked at the web as if we were insects, the spider's prey. Insects have a different system of vision than we do, and different from spiders. Insects see a different spectrum of light. Scientists decided for the first time to study the web using an insect's ocular system. And the insects could not see the web at all. The strands vanished, except for the parts of the web that were coated with the sticky stuff. They caught and reflected sunlight. Scientists were taken aback when they saw that the spiders were not leaving some strands uncoated so they could navigate their web. They left them uncoated because they were painting with sunlight. The strands that had the sticky stuff on them, when hit by the sun, when viewed through the ocular system and light spectrum visible to an insect, took on the outline of flower petals, with the body of the spider at the center of the web becoming the pistil of the flower. It was not science. It was art, and perhaps something more. The spider has different eyes than an insect. It sees a completely different world. It is painting something it doesn't know, that it can't see, and can only comprehend as a means of catching dinner. It recreates this painting over and over again. If the spider succeeds and creates the illusion of a flower, she'll catch a moth and she will live. If not, she will die. So the finer artist survives. Maybe the connection between the spider and a universe it cannot know or see is no different than me and my telescope. There may have been more truth in my looking at the stars than I suspected. I caught a glimpse of mystery and happily made my notes in the dark. Thank you.